everybody, and welcome to our first-time listeners. I'm curious. Have you ever asked these questions? What are the Gospels? What's in the Gospels, or who wrote them? If so, then you're in the right place. Stay tuned to this episode of the Bible Basics Podcast, where we'll answer those questions and more. So grab a comfy chair, a cup of tea, or whatever you like, and we'll get started. Well, welcome everyone. I'm your host, Jackie Adewale, and this is the Bible Basics Podcast, where weekly we break down the Bible into understandable, bite-sized chunks. Hey everyone. Today, we're diving into one of the most captivating parts of the Bible, the Gospels. If you're new to the Bible, this is a great place to start. We'll cover what the Gospels are, the content of the Gospels, and who the authors were. And hang on to the end where we'll throw in some tips on reading the Gospels. Let's start with the basics. What are the New Testament Gospels? Well, gospel means good news. The first 4 books of the New Testament are called the Gospels because they record the good news that a way of salvation had been opened to all mankind through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. These 4 books are called Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They each provide a unique perspective on the life and teachings of Jesus Christ. They also chronicle his sacrificial death, resurrection, and ascension into heaven. Each gospel was written for a different original audience and by a different author. The Gospels were written in the decades immediately following the death and resurrection of Jesus. The first 3 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were called synoptic. That's from a Greek word meaning to see together. In a previous episode, I mispronounced this word. I pronounced it synaptic. So don't be like me. The proper pronunciation is synoptic. And these Gospels follow the same general order of events. They contain some of the same material and deal largely with the ministry of Jesus in Galilee. The 4th Gospel, John, contains a different selection of events. It narrates chiefly the work of Jesus in Judea and interprets his life more from a theological standpoint than the others do. However, these differences between John and the Synoptic Gospels are not contradictory, but complementary. They make up a comprehensive record of the redemptive ministry of Jesus Christ. Let's look a little more at what's in the Gospels. They contain various types of material. Some of these are specific to particular Gospels. For example, hymns are found only in Luke and John. Genealogies are only in Matthew and Luke. Other types of material, however, are found in most or all of the Gospels. There are parables. More than 40 parables of Jesus are included in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. All 4 Gospels contain multiple accounts of Jesus working miracles. These are called miracle stories, and sometimes they're referred to as signs. They're pronouncement stories. All 4 of the Gospels contain examples of what scholars call pronouncement stories. These are sayings that help you remember something Jesus said. For example, a story about Jesus' opponents trying to trap him serves to set up this memorable saying: "Give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's." That's in Matthew 22, 15 through 22, as well as in Mark and Luke. Their passion and resurrection narratives. All 4 Gospels conclude with an extended account of Jesus' arrest, trial, crucifixion, burial, and resurrection. In each gospel, this portion of the story is treated with more intense detail than any other portion, and the pace of the narrative slows to the point where the readers receive an almost hour-by-hour account of what's happening. The Gospels are eyewitness accounts of the life of Jesus. The authors, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were either disciples of Jesus themselves and accompanied him during his years of public ministry, or they were a close associate of disciples and drew upon their eyewitness accounts. Now let's meet those authors. We're going to imagine them as great artists producing masterpieces depicting Jesus Christ. First, let's look at the Gospel of Matthew. Imagine it as a majestic portrait of Jesus as the King. The artist is Matthew, a tax collector turned disciple. He meticulously records Jesus' teachings and their connections to the Old Testament. He quotes more than 60 times from the Old Testament prophetic passages. He emphasizes for his Jewish Christian audience that Jesus is the fulfillment of Old Testament prophecies regarding the coming Messiah and King. Now let's move to the Gospel of Mark. Mark was a close companion of the disciple Peter. His audience was Gentiles, specifically Roman believers. He presents Jesus as the suffering servant of the Lord, sent to serve and not to be served. He focuses on the humanity and deeds of Jesus. His painting is a whirlwind of action and movement. It's as if he's capturing Jesus on the go, performing miracles and spreading the message at lightning speed. In Mark, you'll witness the thrilling moments of Jesus calming the storm, feeding the multitude with a few loaves and fish, and many more action-packed scenes. When reading Mark in the King James Version, I felt like I needed to slow down and catch my breath. With rapid-fire action, he calls disciples, drives out demons, and heals the sick. In the King James Version, almost every sentence begins with "and." And then there are 41 times he begins with "and immediately." And 25 times he begins with "and again." Next, check out the Gospel of Luke. Picture this as a detailed narrative mural. Luke, the physician, is all about precision and storytelling. He's like an artist with an eye for detail. He describes Jesus as Son of Man. His gospel is particularly known for its attention to human stories. He introduces us to the parables like the Good Samaritan and the prodigal son. He emphasizes Jesus' compassion for Gentiles, Samaritans, women, children, tax collectors, sinners, and others regarded as outcasts in Israel. Luke emphasizes the story of salvation with its promised inclusion of the Gentiles. Luke was a frequent companion of the Apostle Paul. He was the only Gentile author in the Bible and also the author of the book of Acts. He wrote this gospel for other Gentiles. Lastly, we focus on John's gospel. Picture his painting as a serene and spiritual masterpiece. John, the beloved disciple, one of Jesus' closest friends, he is the most theological of the Gospels. He invites us to explore Jesus' divinity and the profound nature of his teachings that reveal that Jesus is the Son of God. In John, you'll dive into deep theological waters with passages like, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," and the profound interaction with Nicodemus. John clearly states his purpose in chapter 20, verse 31, where he says he is writing so that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and by believing, you may have life in his name. All right, now that we know what the Gospels are, what's in them, and who wrote them, let's get practical. How should you approach reading the Gospels? Here are a few tips. I'll include these in the written episode description for your future use. First, start with one. Don't feel like you'd have to read all 4 Gospels at once. Maybe start with the Gospel of Mark, which is the shortest and easiest to follow. 2, read slowly. Take your time. The Gospels are like a treasure chest. The more you dig, the more you'll discover. 3, ask questions. As you read, ask questions like the ones I'm going to share. They'll help you keep the purpose and audience of the Gospels in mind. First, what's happening in the passage? Then who is Jesus talking to? This is essential. Is he talking to the disciples, his enemies, a massive crowd? And what is Jesus teaching? And what does Jesus say about himself? What does Jesus say about God? How does Jesus respond to different situations? What does Jesus tell people to do? And what can I learn about Jesus from a given passage? After considering these questions, ask yourself then how this applies to your life. The Gospels, the good news of Jesus. Matthew describes the prophesied coming one as king. Mark presents him as the suffering servant. Luke as the Son of Man, and John as Son of God. Together, they paint a 4-fold portrait of one who is the Savior and Redeemer. However much the 4 Gospels may differ in approach and detail, together they communicate the life and message of Jesus Christ. Well, we've covered a lot today, but remember, you don't have to be a Bible expert to start reading and enjoying the Gospels. Jump on in. Consider the tips I shared. If you have any questions or want to delve deeper into any gospel, drop us a line at info@bible-basics.org. Until next time, keep exploring the Bible, and may your journey be filled with discovery and inspiration. Thank you for tuning in. If this has been beneficial to you, please share it with others. Subscribe or follow. And all of you Apple Podcast listeners, drop us a review.